All right, so hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on how to scale customer experience in a high growth company. My name is Yvette and I'm on the marketing team here at Gladly. I'm really excited to introduce Jeanne Bliss here. She is the founder and president of Customer Bliss, co-founder of the Customer Experience Professionals Association, and also the pioneer of the Chief Customer Officer role. So Jeanne, we're really excited to have you. I'll let you take it away from here and introduce everybody else.
Great. Thanks so much, Yvette. And it's a pleasure to be here. What we are doing today is actually recreating the Chief Customer Officer Human Duct Tape podcast, which I have the pleasure to do once a week with a pioneer inside of their business leading customer experience transformations. And Chelsie and Denis have been on the podcast before. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeanne.
Yeah, so this is a request to bring you back because your podcast and your content was so well received, and you are both leading transformation in high growth, rapid growth organizations. So I want to turn it over to each of you to give you a little bit of an update. We'll be digging into your background more, but about who you are and your company.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start. I'm Chelsie Lee. I'm the Senior Vice President of Customer Strategy at SnackNation, and we fuel a lot of the coolest offices in America with food, snacks, beverages, and we're moving into kind of more full service space around coffee and some other stuff coming this year, which is really exciting. And I've been here 3.5 years, and a little bit over that. And when I took over the team and kind of joined, we're feeding about a few thousand people with our snacks. Now we're feeding almost 1 million people with our food and beverages in the US.
That is very rapid growth. It'll be interesting to talk about how you're navigating that, right? Scaling is always such an interesting challenge. Denis, let's hear about you.
Hey, everybody. So I'm Denis. I'm overseeing the experience and the company culture of Selina. Selina is a startup, a hospitality startup started about 3.5 years ago. The goal here is to create a network of hospitality platforms where we want to provide our customers a new way of experiencing hospitality through different products, co-work, community rooms, private rooms. We have communal spaces like cinema, libraries, playgrounds. And we believe that it's the new generation of hospitality business. So I started about 1.5 years ago. We had about 22 hotels. We are 56 today. We plan to have over 100 this year and about 500 in 5 years, and counting, moving up forward. So a good challenge here in order to scale that experience here.
Absolutely,
but, it's exciting.
It is, and you know what I love is that both of you are around nourishment and hospitality, and I mean, Chelsie, what you do is tangible, but there's such an intangible side of creating environment inside of business as well. And Denis, I think the leading edge part of what you're doing is fascinating. Both of your businesses have more than doubled since you've taken over, tripling, it sounds like. And so I think this is going to be a great conversation, because what we know as CX leaders is it's interesting when you've got kind of placid water, but it becomes really interesting when you're changing and rebuilding on a regular basis. So that'll be a big part of our conversation that we may not have dug into before on the podcast. So I'm looking forward to that. Here's what we're going to talk about, everybody. This is generally going to follow the lines of conversation that we have in the Human Duct Tape show, the Chief Customer Officer Human Duct Tape show. But again, what we've got here today are two people. And so it's going to be very, very fun as we talk to each other and talk from each other's journey. So the first part of the podcast is always what I call the breadcrumbs, because this work takes an interesting set of skills that is sometimes an uncommon path. So why don't we start with you, Chelsie? Tell us about your background and what roles got you to this job?
Yeah, when I first started out, I kind of worked in engineering, and that transformed itself into product design. And what I figured out when I was doing product design for things like, the precursor to the Nest thermostat and stuff like that, is anything that had a human connection to it, I had a knack for it, and I really enjoyed it, thinking of how someone would use this, how they would experience it, how they would feel, and how it would make their life better. And so through that process, I turned my entire focus into customer experience and especially revenue driven by the customer experience. And I've managed experiences for large Fortune 500 companies like Edison International, and some challenging ones like the power outage experience I owned when I was there. I also owned my own consulting firm where I worked with companies, big companies like 3M, and smaller, startup SaaS companies, even the federal government, on around how to create a really good customer experience or human experience. And then when I was ready to say, I really want to own something from soup to nuts, I joined the SnackNation team 3.5 years ago, and it's been a great experience ever since.
Well, thank you. I do love the fact that you started, on the very one side of the brain, and then found a way to blend them. And what we know about this role is it is very much a right brain, left brain role.
Mm-hmm.
So
especially when it comes to data. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but using data to tell a story, you need both sides of your brain for that.
Totally, because otherwise you've just got a bunch of charts and red, yellow, and green dots. And I think that's part of, actually, Chelsie, what's fascinating is that's part of the risk of this customer experience work. When we make it only about data and work streams, we lose the humanity in it and the excitement and the passion that really does drive a lot of the work when you can blend it with the data. Mm-hmm. So thanks. Denis, let's hear a little bit about your path. You've had such an interesting path to getting to this role.
Yeah, exactly. So I started 15 years ago in the food and beverage business in the casual dining sector. I was an assistant general manager, and then grew up as a GM, and then eventually as a district manager, then director of operations. So being in the operation was probably half of my career, slightly more. And then quickly understood that where you really can trigger a difference within the guest experience is through behaviors. It's through building memories, basically. And it sort of triggered passion for me, and started reading about it and getting really specialized and looking at KPIs that really drives those memories and those feelings. So that's sort of how I got into Selina, by becoming an expert, but with the operational background that I have. So I know how hard it is, the day-to-day operation, but by having the right focus, and by being able, like Chelsie was saying, to sort of having the data that backs up the return on experiences that you can make, it's huge. So here we are 15 years later, starting in operation and becoming sort of an expert within the guest experience.
Well, and I think what's fascinating is that both of you are building your path of what I call a legacy CCO, where this isn't your first rodeo, right? Chelsie, you were leading customer experience before, as we mentioned, at Edison. And Denis, say where you were before, because I always mess it up.
Yeah, no worries. So I worked over 12 years at a brand that is called Le Pain Quotidien. It's
I could never say it that way.
The US abbreviation is LPQ, I guess.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's an organic Belgian bakery chain, also driven by the offline experience. So inside the location with a full service restaurant. So yeah, that was for about 12, 13 years, and now Selina for close 2 years.
Yeah, and it's interesting because on the first one, you're really trying to figure out the job. And on the second one, you have the ability to reflect on what you've done before, right? Is this one different for both of you because you've had that, that first one under your belt?
Definitely. I think the first time you do something, you're learning a lot. You're understanding how to tell a compelling story around what you're looking for and what your customers are looking for, and what works and doesn't work. Although you do have to shift your approach to every human that you're interacting with, of course. But I think that the second time around, I had a lot more clarity around what things needed to be done as soon as I got into the role.
Yeah, 100% echo you, Chelsie. Yeah.
I still think, though, the kind of feeling of paranoia we always have in the role never goes away. I don't know. I always had it. What did you guys think?
That's true.
It's just you never feel like you're working fast enough. So let's talk about uniting the organization, and we'll go to the next question. Sorry, back there you go. You were right on. Because what we know is you guys walked into an organization that had the potential to grow, but you were brought in to help accelerate the growth, but accelerate the growth in a customer-driven manner. Denis, when you first got the role, how did you assess the work to be done?
So yeah, I was looking at the different metrics that was already in place in order to measure the current guest experience and the employee experience. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but knowing that both of the experiences are correlated, the first thing we really did is to implement sort of a better voice of employee and voice of customer program in order to ask the right questions, and sort of like a doctor do, right? Like you go to the doctor, you want to assess how healthy you are. And that's sort of the first thing we did is to ask the right questions to the right stakeholders in order to have a snapshot on how the current situation is. So that was the really first thing we did for the first, I would say, 2-3 months.
And how many customers did you have at that time, or what was the size of your customer base?
I will, so top of my mind, I'll speak in hotels. So we had 22 hotels.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we kept on, improving the voice of customer platform. We looked at different providers and assessing our needs versus the tools that is out there. So we did a big due diligence to see what was the better fit for us, and then eventually choose the partner, and then move forward to collect more data, basically more information around our guests.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating because this notion of scaling, right, while you're moving, because when we had our first conversation, both you and Chelsie, a big part of it was figuring out what systems you had to do and processes to continue to create that human connection and value. Anything you want to talk about from that standpoint when you were assessing? Was it largely, Denis, you had people who could give a lot of energy, but perhaps not in an organized, deliberate, repeatable way?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I think overall what gets measured gets done, right? So and again, like the first thing was to measure what was the current situation, and then apply those KPIs as targets for location managers and location management. So that's how we kicked it off. And then obviously finding the right tool for you needs to be really, really an important step in the way you select that partner, because eventually you're going to grow from 20 to hopefully 500-600 locations with them.
Right.
So that piece is super important, because there is a lot of guys out there that are trying to sell the same things, but it needs to be a good due diligence.
So there's a culture shift that has to occur when you go from, everybody doing what they think is right by doing, I call heroics, right? They're doing a full body slam to make it right. How did you identify the KPIs? Maybe tell us a few of them. And then how did you bring people around to the discipline of KPIs? So
that would be the second phase that we did, was sort of starting with an engagement strategy. So aligning all the organization on a common set of behaviors that would trigger a certain set of feelings. We call it the blueprint. Yeah.
Okay, so let's dig into that in a minute, and because I want Chelsie, if you could jump in here. 3 years ago, I think it was, right? You're jump into this organization, already had a value equation. What were you looking for, and how did you assess the path?
So I have a little framework that I usually use when I enter any job, especially in this space. It's, customer, structure, people, and goals. And so, Denis talking about what the goals look like and what you come into. But I was really fortunate, or I asked in the interview process before I accepted the position if I can do a consulting job for 2 weeks with SnackNation, so that I had an understanding of the what I was getting into, not just because you want to know who you're going to work for, but but also because when I start that process, I can take a few days before I start the job and really hit the ground running with that little structure. And I think that, first and foremost for me is always, the customer and the people side. So do we have the right people on the team? Do they have the right skill sets for the future that I see around growth? And what does the team look like? I also assess the customer experience and all of the metrics and data. SnackNation has been really good since the beginning of having so much data. Our main goal, or at least my main goal at SnackNation, is around retention, so net churn. And so what does that look like? What are the reasons people are canceling and all of that? And then just looking at the team structure, are they set up? Like when I came in, our account managers that were managing the accounts, there were no tiers. It was like the wild west of account management, where everybody just got any size of account. And
it's
so
all
looking at the
body
structure,
slams, right?
yeah, all body slams, but then saying,
one.
what do I need from a structure perspective to not need the body slams anymore?
Right. So tell us a little bit about the how. People love specifics here, Chelsie. What were some specific ways you learned about these things? Do you hold specific sessions? Do you go in and talk to people? Because everybody is looking for a little bit of a toolkit or playbook.
Yeah, let's start with the people side, because that's always the hardest thing to do. I'm a really adept people reader, body language, just talking to people one-on-one, understanding how they feel about their role, what they feel like their biggest strengths are that they bring to the table, and then allowing them to let me see how they shine. So kind of getting into their day-to-day a little bit and saying, what are these, what interactions are you having with customers? Which things do you really like? What's your biggest pain point? And I think just getting to know folks on the team really can help you from that perspective. And when I was doing consulting, they didn't know I was going to be their boss. They just thought I was another person showing up. One of the tricks I also had was to, create a really good customer experience for them in the process. And so at the end, I sent them all scratch off lottery tickets and said, I'm so lucky to have worked with you over the last 2 weeks.
Nice. So would you suggest for others entering this role to ask for that 2-week consulting gig?
It was helpful for me. Not everyone can swing it based on what they currently have at their role previous and all of that. I have always tried to do that if I can.
What do you think of that idea, Denis?
I think it's a great idea. You know what? I'm inspired. I would have done the same thing, but I would have accepted the position. But it's a great idea. I love it.
Pretty cool. Anything else you want to walk us through, Chelsie? And the other thing was, so you were brought in also, as Denis was, to impact change across the whole organization beyond your team. What we always are interested in is what kind of communication, once you got the role, was given to the rest of the organization to skid the way, if you would, grease the skids, I'm saying the wrong words, prepare people that you were going to be coming in and asking questions that they weren't probably used to being asked of them. I'd love to know that from both of you.
We're giving a lot of credit to organization in our department. I think there was a lot of I was hired to scale the organization. I have experience managing really large teams, and I think that really paved the way for some respect. But I think it was my job after that to prove to everyone that I had what it takes and that I need to be, I deserve their respect and am willing to dig in and from day one.
Got it. So what about you, Denis, as you were coming into the organization? One of the funny things about this work is we start getting into the work and forget that we have to create a whole communication strategy around it, right? To bring people along for the ride. Was there communication introducing you or helping people understand your role? Or like Chelsie, was that up to you to make that more clear?
Yes, definitely option B. I think in a rapid growth company, it's hard to make the time, even though it's one of the biggest humankind challenges, communication, I guess. But no, I think the approach was mainly from, hey, I've been on your side. I know what it takes to be a GM and work in the operation. Give me a few months and provide you the right tools in order to better improve your experience on the locations. The fact that I still see that as today, right? Like, we're a service provider. All guests are the locals, the local operations. So, I mean, we share the same set of KPIs. So there is no two teams here. It's not global versus local or regional. It's us serving them, and we are on the same ship. So that was my communication to them when I first had a GM meeting, when I was introduced. That was a couple of months later. that's the approach I had. I didn't have the tools back then, but I think having the right mindset and the right attitude and the right speech by telling them that, you know, we're on the same boat, and
Yep.
our goal is to provide a good service to you. So that was a good move, I think.
Okay, well, thank you. So we've got a new question up here, which is an important one. Often, especially in a fast growth company, right? You've got people who are your peers on the C-suite who are moving so fast that inadvertently you could all be moving really fast separately. And one of the things that we've recognized, and that really astute experienced leaders or leaders in this capacity have recognized, is that one of the important parts of this job is being the glue to unite the C-suite, to do a number of things. One version of the truth of where you are today, and establish clarity for how they need to work with you versus you're somebody who comes in and pitches and does the work and they say, oh, great, continue. So Chelsie, how was your work in uniting the C-suite, you know, when you're in this fast-paced world?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about storytelling with data. And I think I'm very fortunate in that the C-level at SnackNation really understands why customer experience drives revenue. We have a subscription business. I can prove really quickly when that's not happening. So I'm fortunate in that respect. But I think that, you know, one of the things that I always do is I become the did you know person with interesting insights and facts that I always have some data backup for. So right now we're looking to scale full service. I recently was like, did you know that, and it's taking a while, because it's a complicated refrigerated products, everything else. Did you know that if we offered these 5 things, we could pick up 85% of the market? Everyone's like, oh, and then we could launch 5 months faster than we're planning on now. And so just really figuring out every month, kind of doing a case study and finding those ad hoc insights and creating a dashboard around that, and just being that did you know person all the time.
You know what I love about that is so many times this work feels overwhelming and like we're boiling the ocean. There's genius in boiling it down to a couple things. It lands, and we used to call it the pearl theory, right? One thing, get people around it and create almost tangibility around it.
Mm-hmm. And it creates trust for you as a leader too.
Yeah.
Because, oh, good insights are coming from over there. I'm excited to see what's next.
Yep. How was there any work you had to do initially, Chelsie, in getting everybody to recognize where you were today in the experience? Because often people are defining good based on the work they're doing or their internal KPIs.
I mean, our company culture is very much like better every day. We could always be doing something better. So it wasn't challenging from that perspective, but I will tell you the challenge we have is that the more customization we add to our product, the more expensive it is for us. So the less our margins are. So I think my big challenge over the last 3 years has been to really find the balance limit between we need to make changes so that we can continue to grow, and really pushing people out of that space that they were squarely in. Like, nobody needs any choice. It's going to be fine. Look at our margins when I first got here.
Yeah. Well, and so pushing them out of what we're doing has worked to the customer's needs have to drive how we change. And that's hard.
Mm-hmm. And in a scaling business, it's just like, okay, what we've done has worked and will continue to work at this level of growth. Yes. If you want to get to that next level over here, then we're not going to get there with this.
Powerful. Denis, let's jump in with you on this. I know when we had our podcast, you had some fascinating things that you did.
Yeah, so in the country with Chelsie, we didn't have a lot of data regarding our customer experience. So it was mainly me explaining what the relationship is between an amazing guest experience and the return on investment, and what other KPIs it drives. I mean, those are a common industry term. The higher the NPS, well, the more revenue per customer you yield, etc. So that was my pitch to them. And then the second piece that we needed to do is to, well, first measure what the KPIs were and what the return is. So what we created along the way, I think it took us six months to build up the tools. And now what we do on a monthly basis is what we have an executive. I just got out of it. Like literally, it was my previous meeting this earlier today. We have a monthly exco meeting regarding the brand experience of every location, and that's sort of a platform of 2.5 hours with all the C-suite, where we go through the voice of employee, the voice of customer, and the voice of local community. That's our impact program. And we share the results, and we literally make call to action to every C-level in that meeting, and our job is to close the loop on strategic level, monthly operational level, and daily operational level. So that helps a lot to unite the C-suite, is to make sure that you have those monthly meetings, you go through it, and you have clear goals and call to action for every C-level, and you close the loop on that. So you provide feedback on the next one on how you close the loop on previous actions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
So
thank you. Sorry, I got excited. I think what you've done, Denis, is interesting. Also, when you've got, you were starting basically very close to from scratch, right? And the clarity of a specific call to action, and one that is customized to C-suite leader, but then also creates a line of sight of how everybody's work then clicks together. What we find is that becomes one of the most valuable things, especially in the beginning, that you can do, because everybody says, I want to do the work, I just need to know what I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah, 100%. So that's even before that. Before we started that meeting, is we started with what is the desired experience we want to get, that we want to give to our guests, and what is the desired feelings that we want to generate to them. What is actually the type of employees that we want to have? What are the behaviors that when I see in them that will generate those feelings and experiences to our guests? So we started to literally redesign the whole language around that all together as a C-suite leaders, and we literally jumped in a room a whole day with a facilitator that built what we call a blueprint today. It's a one-pager where you have we built the famous golden circle from Simon Sinek, like we'll start with why, the what, the when, the how, the who and the how. So starting with this was crucial for us, because that you have real discussions, because there is no but I think, but we all know that this is why we do what we do. And so starting with aligning your language, for sure, definitely, that's the number one thing we all have to do. Yeah. Speaking the same language with your C-suite, even before you start measuring, is crucial.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know, Chelsie, you did some of that as well. Because this is one of the things that we find is also very crucial. And I'm glad you corrected me, Denis, to say, before the KPIs, we have to create a language set. We call it a blueprint as well, which is, how are we going to think about the work of the business, the customer's goals or journeys or emotions, so that it does now unite us and keep linking us back to this work that we have to be united on. So thank you. Chelsie, anything you want to add before we move to our next question?
No, I think I agree with everything Denis said. It's very in line with what I've experienced as well.
Yeah, it's interesting how we all end up starting from different places, but fumbling our way in the dark sometimes to finding things that work. And that's what these conversations are all about. We really do learn from standing on the shoulders of the people who have come before us and the people who are in the trenches with us now. So Yvette, let's go to our next question. I love this one, because this is to say, okay, you've been doing this work for a while. Give us an example of an employee, because we know this is just as much about the employee experience as the customer experience. Let's do one from each, an employee experience and a customer experience that you've improved. I'll tee it to you first, Chelsie.
Sure. I'll start with employee experience, because I think that your customer experience is very much driven around how the employees feel and do their work every day, even if they're not directly engaging with them. For me, making sure my employees have a really good experience in the office is really around that trust factor. And I know we had talked, Jeanne, before about the I'll call it the trust fund, which is a different kind of trust fund. But every single one of my employees has a budget of money that they can spend every month to make things right for our customers. And they don't always use the whole budget, and it's not a substantial amount of money, but I think that it just shows them that we trust them, we believe in what they do and how they can elevate the customer experience in any way that they're looking to. And then on the customer side, I had mentioned before around customization, I've successfully been able over time to talk the C-level into improving customization for our products. But when I started, we had 3 different box types that just rotated monthly. Now we have over 15, including more advanced offerings and the ability to kind of see your snacks ahead of time and swap out what you don't want. And so for us, that's really been a game changer for retention.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So how has it impacted retention?
So from a cancellation rate, it's basically cut our cancels in half
Wow.
in that box type, which I had the inclination and some of the data to prove that would be the case, but it was really just taking the leap and really following up on the metrics and saying like, see, we knew this and we needed to do it sooner.
Well, and it's fascinating because, yes, it's a B2B business, but in B2C, we live choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our whole lives are defined by being able to have choices. And it's interesting because sometimes we show B2C, business to consumer case studies, and the B2B businesses will say, well, that's B2C. And I said, what's interesting is the best B2B companies are emulating the behaviors of the B2C companies that define all of our everyday lives.
Right. They're all humans.
Yes. That right. How about it? Somehow when we go to work, we stop being. Then you got to snort.
I have a funny story about that. We can talk about it later, Jeanne.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I look forward to that. Hey, Denis, what about you? Give us some wonderful changes you've made.
Yeah, so that's why actually, my title is about culture and experience, culture first. So we changed a little bit of the approach, saying, hey, we're not in the hospitality business serving people, but we're in the people business doing hospitality, and making sure that employees are in the center of everything we do. So differently to Chelsie, like a lot of the experience are triggered by employee behaviors here because it's our biggest asset. It's the backbone of our business. So making sure, like towards what I said earlier, aligning on the language and making sure that we know what sort of behaviors we want to see inside of employees was step number one. So once we knew this, what kind of behaviors, because you can teach skills, but teaching behavior takes a lifelong education, right? So already having the right sort of behaviors already inside your ecosystem will help you. It's going to be easier to fine tune them rather than teach like behaviors from scratch, right? So that was the first thing, is to align on those behaviors. And once we had them, then it sort of, we had a natural flow. Obviously, we had a few people leaving the organization because they couldn't recognize themselves within that, and it's actually a good sign. But today we're in a place where we once we started, it was the program we started about 8 months ago, we saw a drop in your turnover for about 9%, which is huge in hospitality.
That is very huge, really.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
what
definitely.
Is the traditional turnover, Denis? Pretty high.
So in our, we started scale up. We are 82%, so it's still very high. Don't get me wrong, but we come from I would say 110. That was a year and a half ago. So we see that massive drop going down month over month. So we're having the right focus here. But yeah, I would say the industry average is around 90%. So it's not that bad. We're doing okay. But our goal is to go below 50. So we don't want to compare ourselves to traditional hospitality business in general. And so the next step was to train people and we call it activation because it's hard to train people on behaviors, but rather activation. So it's gamification / learn to play activities where we make people realize how important a certain set of behaviors are. And you learn by doing. So it's literally activities that you do together that make you realize how important, for example, trusting each other is. By doing activity, it could be wall climbing, whatever it is that is related to that behavior, makes you realize the importance of that. So you keep on fine tuning and improving those behaviors that will result in the desired feelings that we want to see in our guests, because that's the only thing we want to scale. It's a holistic approach and not the hardware, I would say. So that was so important for us to make sure that we defined those behaviors and then started with those activation. And we started 4 months ago, and we see an amazing improvement in our customer engagement, in our employee engagement measured by the employee net promoter score. So that's great. People are getting excited. We share the common language. So during those activation, we speak about our blueprint. We talk about a why, or what, or how, and a who. And we talk about how we can activate those behaviors, and we definitely see that the numbers are showing the impact of the whole program. So that's really exciting.
Hey, Denis, this is really fascinating. I want to give people context of how your people go inside of the hospitality businesses, because you're talking about behavior, and it may be good to connect the dots for them. So
do you want to repeat the question so that I can answer?
Sure. When you're talking about gamification and behavior, is it for people inside the hotels that are acting as the service providers inside the hotels? I just want to make sure people know who this is for.
So this is, I'm only talking about employee experience right now. So the whole gamification / learn through play activities that we do, those activations that I'm talking about, is only for our employees right now. So that's 100% engagement strategy, if you want.
Okay, and then it's for how they're interacting with your clients, correct? In the hospitality businesses?
Clients and with their colleagues. Yeah, we don't make any difference there. Yeah.
Got it. Perfect. Okay. What about a customer experience?
So this is, well, related to the certain set of behaviors, like this, it triggers feelings, right? Because ultimately we want our experience to be memorable, and what drives memories are feelings, right? And so what drives feelings is behaviors. So we want to make sure that they transmit that behavior to our guests. And yeah, interestingly enough, we see also an increase in our net promoter score. So there is, those two are correlated at 100%. And yeah, I mean, you can have the best bed ever, you can have the most beautiful location, you can have the best food ever, but if the interaction you have with the people that serves you is really, really bad, you will never recommend that place. So our goal here again is to align on those behavior that will trigger those feelings, and that's our sort of how we made the difference. And we see that the teams that really took this personally and did a big event with their teams and activations with their teams, we saw a massive increase in net promoter score, and that's probably the best result you can ever see as an experience manager, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both so much. Anything else either of you want to add before we go to our pay it forward question?
Nope.
Okay, so let's go forward. This is I love this question. It's one of my favorites. It's thinking about your background, you know, this large body of work, and giving people the benefit of reflecting on your experience. So Denis, what do you know now that you wish you knew then about doing this work, about leading this work, about being part of this work?
Well, definitely I mean, it sounds obvious, but focusing on your employees, on your people, and align them on that language is number one key. And I wish that this was taught in universities, but more in depth, more profoundly, with a clear clear plan. I think it's very holistic, but there are tools today that enables you to do that, and that guides you on how to do it. So yeah, I would say that.
Okay. Anything else you want to add, Denis?
No.
Okay. Chelsie, what about you?
So completely agree on 100% with Denis, and, you know, focusing on the people, and especially around, you know, in university when people take, you know, business courses and things, we just don't cover how to get right outcomes from people. But I won't go into that anymore. What I will say, I'll give another one. For me, over a long period of time, I've really learned that your customers are invested in you in a really powerful way, and if you engage them and ask them truly what they want, and NPS is important, but understanding people's stories and digging deep. We recently had a summit for our whole company where we talked about where are we going, all this stuff, and we invited a customer panel for our customers to actually come and sit in front of the company and ask questions about how their experience was and what we could do better for them. And I think that really, you know, tying that together and using your customer bases as a real sounding board, not just a group of people that fill out surveys for you, and really caring about them. If I had known that earlier on in my career, I think I could have moved a lot faster on some of the bigger customer experience work that I've done. Yeah,
Chelsie, I'm glad you brought that up. It's so fascinating because we do the same thing often. We'll bring a group of customers in and then intermingle them with 3 or 4 execs, and it's just a conversation that we facilitate, and they, you know, we coach them that they can't defend, deny, or explain away what the customer said, but only ask clarifying questions. And at the end they're like, why didn't we do anything about this? And we'll be like, well, we presented this to you in survey results 4 or 5 times, but it's until they're looking at a human being and talking to them, like you mentioned, that there's a real person talking about their life, it changes things. And to your point, it accelerates things.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for hanging out with us again today. I think we've got some questions from the audience. Again, we have here 2 really amazing leaders who have accelerated growth and are building deliberateness and reliability in rapid growth companies. Chelsie Lee, who is the Senior Vice President of Customer Strategy at SnackNation, and Denis, tell me how to say your last name. Is it Drossart?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, there you go. I'm always so worried that I mess people's name up. Chelsie, yours is so much easier. Vice President of Experience at Selina. So do we have some questions for us? I think the first question I see here is, Chelsie, you talked about scaling and customization. There were some questions around how did you get your leadership team to finally accept to do the complex work? And how did you convince them beyond a hunch that it was going to really drive business growth?
Tiny tests, micro tests. So, and I can test whatever I want at SnackNation. So I said, okay, I'm going to take these 50 customers and I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to survey them. We're going to talk about the experience. And then sometimes those tests, unfortunately, in a recurring revenue business take a little bit longer for statistical significance, because you have to say, is this group of customers canceling less frequently than others, which takes a little bit of time to net out. But I just did that all over the place. And that also helped me figure out the right customization, not just like free for all, hey, pick whatever you want, because I think for us, that's not easy either. And so I was able over many, probably 15 or 20 different micro tests to figure out what really worked, and then do the projections based on the churn data that I was seeing that was able for the team to say, there's some meat behind this. It's not just Chelsie saying like, I listened to the comments and I hear people saying this and we should do it. Just keep in mind, your customers, they don't always tell you exactly what they need either. I mean, I think with the Henry Ford quote, if I designed what the people asked me for, I would have designed a better horse or a faster horse, you know?
Totally true. So how did you organize the test? Was it, you just sent out different boxes, or how did that work from a tactical standpoint?
It was very manual. So I had a person on my team that I was like, okay, these 50, we're going to take 50 general folks in the population. We're going to put them in this experience, which was driven, to be honest, with like type form surveys. And it had a decent looking front end. And we said, let's just go for it. And we let them start picking their snacks, and we just moved on from there. We just duct taped it all together to make it work at the very beginning.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that, and Denis, I know we talked about this before, and would love you to chime in, is sometimes we wait for everything to be perfect, but clunky is good, right? Just get it going.
Mm-hmm.
Denis, there was a question here for you around, you're moving so rapidly. Is there anything you had to let go of? And if so, what was it as you were moving so quickly?
Actually, no. We keep on adding stuff. So we're very demanding. Like, letting go is not part of a culture. We need to get things done, and the opposite end. Like the more we know, the more we do, the better. Obviously, we have to focus. So one of the things that we do now is moving from I think to I know. So yes, there will be a few decisions that we won't do based on what we know from the data that we receive right now from our customers. But ultimately, we want to become even better at things that we thought we're good at providing experiences. Now we know because we have a high satisfaction rate on all the events that we created on site. So we're going to invest even more in that. Like, this is huge. Now, letting go, I'm thinking
or maybe shifting or changing or revising something that you thought, and then you changed as a result of getting into the work.
Yeah, I think, the fact that we've been able to prove that there is a clear return on experience, and data has proven it, that, we've been able to add a little bit more people on our team to be able to, roll the program faster and more accurately. So that helps, right? Like when you have data that backs you up and they're going into the right direction. So I would say this, like we're more focused. We have a dedicated team that measures the voice of customer. We have a culture team in place that drives the engagement strategy that we pulled together, but we also have somebody who's overseeing the voice of employee. We have somebody full-time that does the impact program. So we call it the Selina Gives Back program that we build. So all of those 3 departments now sits under us, and we have full support and commitment from the C-suite to drive this full force, because there is a backing up by data there. So that's definitely a good sign.
Oh, that's great. In fact, Denis, you just answered another question which we got, which was, how is your team organized? Did you want to add anything to that, Denis, before I ask Chelsie? How many people do you have on your team, for example?
We are 9, and that's including so we have 3 we have 3 official HQs, one in London, New York, and Panama, and the office and culture, we call them culture and office manager, reports to our division, so that includes them. And we have I think 2 or 3 interns, so let's call it a team of 10 roughly.
Okay. Chelsie, how is your team organized?
Yeah, and after that, I have some comments about things. I let go of stuff all the time.
Great. Oh, good. Okay.
So my team, so SnackNation is about 160 people. My team is about 50 of those people, which is a sizable portion of the company. I see my job as kind of separated into 3 functions, and so my team is that way as well. So I have the account managers and the customer support people for all our B2B, and we do have a B2C product as well. Mm-hmm. And then we also have a team that just works on customer experience. What does the box look like? The content, how does it arrive? Is there a better web experience for people, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the third arm is really just me trying to say, what does our product look like in the future to drive the most amount of revenue for the longest amount of time?
Ah, great. And are they all with you in the same location, or are they across different locations?
Mostly in Los Angeles. We also have a satellite office in Chicago with a few folks as well.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And thank you. And so you talked about letting go.
Oh, I let go of stuff all the time.
Give some examples, because to me that's it. And to your point, Denis, sometimes it's not letting go, but revising, right, and amending.
Sure. So at SnackNation, we try to practice a culture of essentialism, meaning that we're understanding the top 5 things we're trying to do and just working towards those. And so as part of my NPS surveys, I have kind of regression analysis modeled on that tells me what are the top 5 indicators of NPS, the things that impact it the most. And so I know from so customization, number 1, we've talked about that a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I think that for me, understanding what those top 5 things are, and then when we have great ideas in these other buckets, they don't get prioritized, or if we're doing something like we were putting a lot of effort into a really big content strategy, and then we discovered it's not a top 5 item, like let's let that go for now, because it's not the most important thing for our customers or our company. And it doesn't mean it's not a good idea and it doesn't end up on the back burner, but let's just keep it on the shelf and we'll figure it out when it becomes important.
Well, and anything else? Because I wanted to tee back to Denis too, because I think this is about focus, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Denis, so maybe that's a better way to ask the question, because what we know when we get these survey results or verbatims, we could all have a list of 100 things, right? But to Chelsie's point, you're focusing on the top 5. Have you done something like that as well to make sure that you're focusing on the things that are most important, and versus just using so much energy to shoot at 100 different things?
Of course. So again, that's backed up by data. So every month we have that voice of customer, voice of employee, and so whenever we do a call to action to the C-suite, we make sure that we focus on 1, 2, 3 items per person max, and we focus on that. Like we've seen that we had a massive drop in our sleeping experience last month. So we did made 2 call to action to our chief operating and chief development officer to make sure that issue will be resolved. We're just going to facilitate that close the loop process, but we're not the ones who's going to close the loop on that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of the focus, more on a monthly basis with strategic actions, and on a daily, weekly practices with our operational teams in general, with what the guest is voicing, basically.
Perfect. So I'm so glad both of you answered this the way you did, because for everybody out there, what we know is beyond being a uniter, such a critical part of this job is focusing and not boiling the ocean and telling the story so the most important things come up. And to your point, Denis, also specificity of action versus vagueness. Go take care of people. Be nicer. This is where we inadvertently have a proliferation of things versus when we have people in your roles, you can be very specific about what you will do and what you won't do and what goes on the back burner. And to your point, Denis, the specificity of actions for people. I think that's all the questions we have from the audience. Yvette, did you have any that you'd like to ask of the team here?
Yeah, no, thank you so much to both of you. I just particularly want to call out that I enjoyed learning about how you each assessed the work to be done at each of your organizations, whether it was, mapping out a blueprint for Denis or, coming in as a consultant for Chelsie. I thought all those stories were really powerful. So thank you.
Great.
Yep. So on that note, again, thank you all so much. Before we all sign off, I just wanted to share a little bit more about Gladly and specifically how we're helping companies transform their customer experiences. So for some background, we started Gladly to reinvent the customer experience so that it's centered around the customer rather than a case number or a ticket number. So for example, if anyone has ever been on the other side, so as a consumer, whether you're contacting customer service through email, through phone, through chat, we know that all of these experiences can sometimes be disjointed, and then you're forced to repeat your story over and over again, and that's not what anybody wants to do when they're trying to get their problem solved. So with Gladly, we help create seamless experiences via enabling customers and agents to communicate across all these channels in one place. So again, this helps turn agents into heroes and customers feel like people, not case numbers. So on that note, if anybody would like to learn more, feel free to sign up for any of our group demos, which happen weekly. And then I would just want to call out and say thank you to Jeanne, to Chelsie, to Denis, and if anybody has anything else to add, please do so.
Well, thank you both to Denis and Chelsie. Again, you're just a plethora of valued information, and I just want to turn it over to both of you to say goodbye if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, have a great day, everybody. And if I could, I'd just love to also say you can hear more from Chelsie and Denis at customerbliss.com/podcast, where you've got more people telling their real life stories every day. So thanks everybody for that. And Yvette, thanks so much for being such a great host today.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.